John Rich, one half of Big and Rich, on the line with us. And let me tell you something. You were in Lawrenceburg a few weeks ago for the Fred Thompson homecoming of the Fred heads out there. And I got to tell you, to be able to stand up there by yourself with an acoustic guitar and no voice correction and be able to stay on key and keep the whole crowd going, you were fabulous.
Well, it was 8,000 people, and roughly in that neighborhood. And I was told we want you to sing 2 or 3 songs, as Fred, was getting there and kind of get everybody wound up and pumped up for the senator. And I said, absolutely. I've been doing that with him around the country, and got up there, and they had some transportation issues, so I ended up playing by myself almost an hour.
I know it. It was great.
I got to tell you, it was. I had to really start digging down to try to figure out, because the audience was. It's a good old small town Tennessee audience, and I thought, what can I sing that doesn't involve drinking, carousing, or any profanity whatsoever? So I, of course, delved into my gospel library, being that my dad has been a preacher my entire life. I have pretty extensive gospel music, so we tore into gospel music and ended with Rocky Top, Tennessee. So,
you threw in some.
We were set.
Yeah, you were, but you threw save a horse, ride a cowboy, and then you said, of course, your father wasn't too crazy about that. You told him that Dad, 10% goes to the Lord. And he said, okay,
that's right. That's right. He said, well, all right, well maybe I can handle that. Yeah,
I can live with it. So, have you grew up in Texas, right?
Yeah, I grew up in Amarillo, Texas, which is up in the Panhandle out in West Texas, and moved back to Tennessee. My mother is from Dixon, Tennessee, and we moved back here when I was about 15, 16 years old. So I've spent roughly half my life in Texas and half here in Tennessee.
Okay, so you got into the music business just from being right outside of town, then, huh?
Yeah, out in Amarillo, there's the music business is something that never enters your mind. But yeah, once I got out here, I started doing some talent contests and this and that, and got some encouragement from some people, and hung in there. And what do you know? I've had a pretty good career in country music.
No kidding. Well, so have you always been politically astute? You've always been into politics, or is that just something that has come in the last few years?
Well, I would say probably like a lot of young Americans. I mean, when you're 18 to late 20s,
you got one thing on your mind, baby.
And you're trying to figure out how to get by and how to get a career and all these things. I think you think politics is so far above your head that you really can't have an impact on it, which is just simply not the case. And here, as of late, I started doing all my research on all the candidates on both sides of the fence. It's pretty simple. You go to Google and you Google their name and the words voting record, and you can pretty much look up anything anybody's ever voted on in their career in politics. And as I started doing that due diligence, I researched Fred Thompson and realized that he voted the way I would have voted on just about everything he votes on. He is the only true, consistent conservative in this race on either side of the fence. His stance on the pro-life issue, as opposed to Rudy Giuliani's pro-choice, is just, to me, not even a question. The way I was raised, that's one of those things that is a deal breaker for a guy like me, and I think it is for millions of Americans that haven't heard Fred Thompson's message yet. That's why I think this debate that's going on today and over the next few months, as they hear more and more about Fred's message, I really believe that the real conservative base that we have is going to turn out in Fred's favor.
Yeah, I've heard all these naysayers out there saying, well, he's not lighting them up in Iowa. And then we get the Iowa polls out from the Des Moines Register yesterday. It says Fred's in second place by Mitt Romney. Come on.
Well, I tell you what, I bet the people that said he's not lighting them up weren't with me when I was with Fred in Iowa, because I was with Fred in Iowa, riding in Fred's Suburban with him and his wife, Cherry, and going, to the diners and going to the, the civic organization, little buildings and, restaurants, whatever. And, I've heard him give his message now many, many times. And the guy speaks a language we can all understand. He cares about what we care about as Americans. And those two things are God and country.
Right.
His message is built off of what made this country great. One thing about his message that I really liked is the aspect of federalism, that the United States government should not be setting laws, especially on social issues, for everybody across the board. The Supreme Court should not be able to do things like that. Vermont is not Oklahoma, California is not Tennessee.
Right.
And so for Fred, he's like on a state level. There's a lot of issues out there being decided by the Supreme Court and by our government that they have absolutely no business deciding on behalf of us. We're 50 different states. We were set up to be that way. And that's a message that really resonated with me, Yeah, absolutely. The government, they're far enough on us right now. It's a little uncomfortable as it is. I can't imagine if they impeded upon us anymore what life is going to be like over the next 20 years and what my kids' lives are going to be like when I have kids. So a lot of things that Fred says to me are just the basic founding principles of the United States. He's a guy that is not trying to keep a seat. He's not an elected official. He's not trying to preserve something. He's really coming out of his private life because he says, honestly, I don't see anybody saying what I believe in this race. And, it's him and Rudy Giuliani in most of the polls across the country. And honestly, I know Rudy's message and I know Fred's message as well as anybody. You cannot be more different in their messages on especially on social issues. And I think Fred's the only guy that I could vote for with a clear conscience, and I think a lot of people are going to feel the same way.
Talking with John Rich of Big and Rich. John, one of the issues out there that James Dobson had a problem with him, and I've said the same thing that Fred's saying now, which is James Dobson wants a federal constitutional amendment that would ban gay marriage, and the way the Constitution's set up, it's a contract. It's a contract between the states and the federal government. It says, look, we as the federal government, with all of the states combined, we're going to handle certain things like coining money and national defense and things like this and building some interstate highways. But other than that, what's not in this contract is left to the states. And one of the things that's left to the states is how you determine what marriage is, who can get married, and how many people you can marry and all this. And if Vermont wants to have gay marriage and everybody who's gay that wants to move to Vermont and live happily ever after, that's what the individual states you were talking about were set up about. You go where with like interest and live and let live.
Right.
And
That's
Fred's
right.
that way, but James Dobson doesn't understand that.
Well, I think Dr. Dobson will the more he understands it, the more he'll get on board with that idea. I mean, you got to understand, you can't fix everything all at one time. And honestly, this is the United States of America. I do things that people don't like. You do things that people don't like. And that's just the way it is. We got a right to do those things. A lot of people don't like the fact that I might have a handgun in my house, for personal protection.
Yeah,
but
don't tell anybody. They'll come get it.
It doesn't matter if they don't like it or not. That's the way it works. And one thing about Fred Thompson is he's not interested in the government ramrodding something down everybody's throat. He is interested more in the states taking responsibility and the government just being there to help get them to that point. You know what I mean? Take some of these. I mean, the Supreme Court to make decisions, it's like what he says about Roe versus Wade. Fred Thompson is quoted as saying, Roe versus Wade is bad law based on bad science. And that is his quote about Roe versus Wade.
Right. Before that, it was left with the individual states. Some states allowed you to have an abortion, some didn't. If you were of a mind to go have an abortion, you went to another state where they allowed it.
And you know what? And the fact that it stepped up to the level it did is not right, in my opinion. I think the people listening to this broadcast, this interview, a lot of them, when they hear Fred's message about abortion, and they're able to compare that with Rudy Giuliani's message about abortion, and I don't think it's going to be an issue. I think you're going to go, well, yeah, that's our guy. That's the guy that thinks that. That's the guy that's always voted that way, and that's the guy that's going to protect that issue on our behalf.
Yep.
And there's just no doubt about it. It's a no-brainer. It's Fred Thompson. Whenever I did my due diligence on Senator Fred Thompson and realized that his views were in line with my views and in line with my family's views and beliefs, man, it just wasn't even a question. I said, you know what? There's so much in the balance this time. If Hillary Clinton becomes our president,
we're in trouble.
The things that will ensue after that are unlike anything probably any of us can imagine, honestly.
Oh, well, look, she's the anti-Fred. I mean, as far as the big government and all the things that you're talking about.
I got to tell you, man, I mean, I'm taking kind of a risk, like you said earlier, being an entertainer. When you really step out and back a politician, I would rather take a risk on alienating some of our audience than to not be heard and watch Hillary Clinton go trotting into the White House. Yeah. I cannot stand by and not at least speak on behalf of a guy that I really believe in, which is Fred Thompson.
Absolutely. Well, we're up against the clock, my friend. John Rich, appreciate your time, my friend.
Hey, you got it. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks John. All right,
Bye.
John Rich from Big and Rich.